Ready to go? Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Owen Barder. I'm a Senior Fellow and the Europe Director here at the Centre for Global Development. And I want to welcome you all today. We're in Birdsall House, named after our founding president. And since this is my first time hosting a meeting here, I just want to pay tribute to Nancy for all the work she has done over the years, standing up for poor people around the world. I'm very honored to work in the organization that she leads. We have a fantastic morning ahead of us. We're hoping to have a keynote speech from the Minister of Finance for Nigeria, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. I say hoping because I know that she has some extremely high-level meetings this morning, and they are people that might possibly make her wait. But assuming that she gets here on time, she'll be joining us later in the morning to make her keynote speech. Our running order this morning will be a presentation of the findings of the 2014 Aid Transparency Index. The presentation will be by Rachel Rank, the Director of Publish What You Fund. And then we have an absolutely outstanding panel to discuss the findings of the survey and to discuss the future of aid transparency. After that, you, the audience, will have an opportunity to ask questions or make points, short points, I hope, and I hope that we'll have a good interactive discussion among the panel and with you here in the room. And to remind you all that we're also being streamed live if the technology is working for people to watch at their desks or if they're not here in Washington, DC. And we have a hashtag, if you're following it on Twitter, the hashtag is hashtag 2014ATI, 2014ATI. You may have noticed that at the back of the room, we have various computers set up. They're there to enable various partner organizations and friends to demonstrate their systems that they've put in place to make aid more transparent. So those of you who are here in DC will be able to wander around and see these systems. We have, I think, aid data, development initiatives, the foreign assistance dashboard, Interaction, MCC, PEPFAR, Publish What You Fund, Swedish CEDA, the UNDP, and the World Bank Open Aid Partnership. So at the end of the session at 10:30, please get yourself a cup of coffee and mingle with them and let them show have a look at their systems. So that's the running order for this morning. Let me say a few words about why we here at the Centre are so pleased to be providing the venue for today's launch of the Aid Transparency Index. As an organization, the Centre for Global Development doesn't take institutional positions, and the scholars and staff here at CGD often disagree about a lot of things. But we do have quite a few shared beliefs and shared attitudes amongst us. And one of those shared beliefs, I think it's fair to say, is that the quality of foreign assistance would be improved if it were more accountable. I personally became interested in this topic when I was the director in the UK's Department for International Development, responsible, amongst other things, for the effectiveness of foreign assistance. And I came to realize that if we were going to win a conversation in the UK for improving the quantity of aid, then we would have to make a real effort to be more transparent with the citizens, with civil society, and with Parliament in the UK about where their money was being used and what results it was achieving. But I also became convinced that if we were going to improve the quality of aid, the effectiveness with which it was spent, then we would need to be more transparent with the governments, the treasuries, the parliaments, civil society organizations, and citizens in developing countries about how the aid that was meant to be benefiting them and their countries was being spent and what it was being used for, and that we would need to be more accountable to them, the intended beneficiaries, if aid was going to improve in effectiveness. So that's why I, like many of my colleagues here at the Centre, believe that aid transparency is a fundamental building block towards more effective development cooperation. Donors committed themselves to aid transparency in the Busan Declaration of 2011. And you'll be hearing today about some enormously impressive progress that some donors have made towards that goal. But you'll also be hearing today about the extent to which this progress is, to put it diplomatically, patchy. There are parts of the aid system that are simply not meeting their international commitment made in Busan to be more transparent about aid. So that's enough from me. Let me introduce George Ingram, who is chair of the US Advisory Committee of Publish What You Fund. He's also a senior fellow at Brookings. George, please come to introduce our speaker. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Owen. Nobody introduced Owen because he doesn't need to be introduced.
I introduced myself.
But just one thing, in case you get the impression that during the conversation that he knows what he's talking about, Owen was in this space of aid transparency before any of us. And he was one of the fathers or godfathers of aid transparency in IATI. So he's right where he belongs today. It's my pleasure to introduce Rachel Rand, who is the director of Publish What You Fund. She brings 15 years of working on development and transparency in the public space, in the private space, and in civil society. She joined Publish What You Fund in 2010, one of the first 3 staffers of Publish What You Fund, and she is the person who has built up the index. She and her team have created the index into the industry standard for monitoring transparency, and it now assesses 70 organizations, which you will see shortly. Rachel, more than anyone, knows the difficulty of finding data, analyzing data, and using it. In addition to her work at Publish What You Fund, she has done research on climate finance and on Chinese aid transparency. We should hear from you about that sometime. And she co-chairs a civil society working group on transparency. Rachel, thanks for being with us here today.
Good morning. I'm delighted to see so many people here today and very excited to be presenting our 2014 Aid Transparency Index results. Before I start, I just want to thank Owen and CGD for hosting us today in this fantastic venue. This is the 4th index we've published, and I'm looking forward to discussing this year's findings and recommendations with you, and I hope we'll have a lively discussion with lots of questions afterwards. 4 years ago, we stood in front of donors and we presented our first assessment of aid transparency. The reception to that assessment could be described at best as chilly. But that didn't put us off, and we remain ambitious, but we also remain impatient. This is a key time to see how donors are doing with implementing their Busan commitments on aid transparency, specifically the commitment to implement a common open standard by December 2015. There are now just 14 months to go before that deadline, and today we'll see which organisations are on or off track with meeting it. Since the 2013 index was published, we've seen some exciting developments in aid transparency. 92 organisations have started publishing to the IATI standard, including the Gates Foundation, PEPFAR, and the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This brings the number of organisations publishing their data in open, comparable formats to nearly 300. Following the UN's call for a data revolution, an expert advisory group has been established to advise the Secretary-General on what that means in practice. Also, the US Foreign Assistance Dashboard and IATI are now speaking the same language, making it easier for the largest bilateral to publish its data to the agreed standard. And several organisations have launched open data platforms driven by IATI data. They're using this information for their own planning and decision-making, and this marks an important shift from publishing raw data to making it meaningful for different users. As we'll come to see, though, more remains to be done, particularly by some large and influential donors. So, on to the results. We've assessed 68 organisations in 2014, including all the major multilaterals and bilaterals. Of these, just 15 are ranked as good or very good. These 15 donors are on track with meeting the 2015 deadline to make aid transparent. The results follow the trends of previous years. A lead group of donors are making continuous improvements to the information they publish, but the majority, they lag behind. The top ranking agency in 2014 is UNDP, with an impressive score of 91%. They're followed by DFID's top performer from 2012, and then MCC, which held the top spot last year. As in 2013, China takes last place. The average score for all organisations remains low at just 39%, and there's an increasing gap between those at the top and those at the bottom of the ranking. In the race to the top, some high-performing organisations from 2013 do even better this year. This includes the African, Inter-American and Asian Development Banks, Canada, the European Commission, Sweden and UNICEF. All these organisations have leapfrogged others that have not made significant changes to the amount of information they publish or its accessibility. We commend these organisations for their efforts. There's also been some important progress by Ireland, Korea and Japan's Maid Aid agency, JICA. This reflects their first steps in publishing machine-readable data. But these organisations now need to focus on improving the comprehensiveness of that information before the December 2015 deadline. But it's not all good news. The ranking still has a long tail of low scorers. More than half the organisations we've assessed perform poorly, scoring less than 40%, and nearly a third are in the very poor category. These organisations do not systematically publish information, and it's really hard to find data on their activities. Much of the information we're looking for is hard to find. It's scattered across websites, and it's difficult to join the dots between descriptive, financial, and results data for individual projects. What is available is often locked away in PDFs, or it's hopelessly out of date, meaning there is a long way to go before we can get a full picture of all current development flows. Given this is the fourth year that we've produced the index, we're starting to see some emerging trends. As in previous years, in general, larger organisations perform better than smaller ones. As a group, multilaterals perform better, with the majority ranked in the very good or good categories. This includes several development banks. Of the bilaterals, a handful perform well, and some are improving, but the majority are in the poor or the very poor categories. And the US is mirroring these overall trends. MCC continues to lead, but the major spenders are being left behind, including state and US aid, who urgently need to accelerate their progress and to learn from their colleagues. And the US isn't alone. Other major providers are also spread across the ranking, including France, Germany, and Japan. The importance of these donors to this agenda is huge. They must lead by example. Some of the best performers and biggest improvers in 2014, including the AFDB, MCC, PEPFAR, and UNICEF, have released comprehensive data sets over a relatively short period of time. They've shown that progress can be made, and it can be made quickly. There are also some shining examples in the health sector. Gavi and the Global Fund are amongst the highest performers this year, but their efforts are compromised until others follow their lead. We're all aware of the emerging Ebola crisis in Africa, and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf has recently called for more aid information from donors to keep track of what's being mobilised in Liberia. We need donors to improve their systems now and publish current data so that we're ready when the next crisis occurs. Based on current trends, the donor community as a whole is set to miss meeting its transparency commitments. But this could be avoided. The index shows that donors can quickly turn around their performance when the political and technical leadership exists. We have 3 recommendations this year. Firstly, the international donor community needs to work together to provide a full picture of development flows. Donors that are lagging behind need to be held to account, and all donors need to ensure that transparency is integral to the post-2015 agenda so we really can deliver a data revolution. Secondly, organisations should improve the quality of their data and promote its use. The information needs to be timely, accessible, comparable, and comprehensive. Financial data needs to be supplemented by the added value information fields such as results and evaluations data. Once the quality is there, donors should start using the information themselves and promote its use by others, including partner country governments and civil society. And finally, the clock is ticking. All organisations need to deliver on their commitments by the end of 2015. Urgent action is needed, and it's needed now. All organisations should make their plans public with timelines and delivery targets. They should discuss their plans with the potential users of the information. A data revolution is underway, and donors need to play their part and open up their data. They urgently need to accelerate progress if they're going to meet the 2015 deadline. We believe this is a challenge that the aid community can meet. Thank you. Thank you.
So is these microphones on? Can you hear me? Yeah, at the back. Yeah, excellent. So, Rachel, thank you very much indeed for that introduction. I have a fantastic panel here. Let me first introduce you all. I'm going to ask you questions, and then we're going to hand over to you in the room to make points and ask questions. On my far left, Assistant Secretary General Haoliang is the Assistant Administrator and Director for the Regional Bureau for Asia and the Pacific at UNDP, which, as you've just heard, came top of the index this year. So a bit of congratulations to you. Assistant Secretary General was previously the Deputy Regional Director of the Regional Bureau for Europe and the Commonwealth of Independent States. And before that, had a varied career as an engineer in New Jersey and a lecturer in Shanghai. So you're very welcome. Okay. Rachel, you've heard from and has been introduced. To my right, Ambassador Debbie Birx is Ambassador at Large and Coordinator of the US government activities to tackle HIV/AIDS globally. She's a famous medical expert and leader in the field of HIV/AIDS. So as the global US AIDS coordinator, Debbie oversees the implementation of the US President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, as well as the US government's engagement with the Global Fund for AIDS, TB, and malaria. Ambassador, you're very welcome. And finally, on my right, Dalitso Kubalasa is the Executive Director of the Malawi Economic Justice Network, which is a network of over 100 civil society organizations working in economic governance. And its core purpose is to create partnerships that will ensure government policies and actions are of direct benefit to the poor. Dalitso, you're very welcome. Thank you. So I'm going to begin by asking a few questions, and then we'll open it up. And I'm going to begin, if I may, with you, Dalitso. You're the representative here of the demand side for aid information. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like in your work at the moment and why it's important to you to see aid transparency?
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be here. I think to begin with, it's always important to locate the context. And I think the context, according to us, is all that we try to do, be it from the development cooperation, the aid, all that the governments are trying to do is to try and make life better for the people, the poor and the vulnerable at the lowest sections of society. So I think as we do that, it's always very important not to lose sight of that bigger picture. And when we do what we do, we know aid is very much part of the solution, but it's just one of the means to an end. And I think as we look at the various development partners who are trying to support making life better, it's always important, therefore, to remember that I think there are different players at different levels. And in the final analysis, I think this is a collective responsibility. When the aid is given, when the governments have also maybe found other resources domestically mobilized, all of that needs to go where it's intended. And if a lot of this information is not available at different levels for the different players, which include the people themselves, which include the civil society, people like us who try to make sense of everything, who try to demystify, to unpack, when information is not available, when the quality of information is not up to speed, when the data is not as timely available, then that will be a very big missing link in the sort of results that we would want to see at the end of the day. So this, the Aid Transparency Index, it's a very, very important mechanism in that respect, because I think it will help all of us to remember the bigger picture, not to lose sight of that bigger picture, to ensure that we get the most from this collective responsibility. The empowerment is very much part and parcel of the solution that we want to see in getting the development results. So it's really as simple as that for us. So when this information, we are waiting for this information. The more and the sooner this information is made available to the different levels, players like us, we unpack it, we demystify it, we package it in such a way that it will be very easy for all these players, all the people to follow and track the money and know what sort of resources have come from where, what are they intended for, and what is happening to these resources, so that in the final analysis, we really see the sort of results that we want to see at the lowest level where the beneficiaries are standing, where the results, I think, will really have to be seen.
Can you, for a Washington audience, can you say something about your experience today? Perhaps people here don't understand what you have to do now if you want to find out about aid. What's your day-to-day experience of getting information from donors and from the government? Is that something that's relatively easy to do, or is that something that's very difficult?
Well, I think it's been a very big struggle. I think I'll start with that. It's not very easy, for you to walk and knock and get the data that you'd want to get.
Is that what you do? You knock on a door?
We try, and knock on any door that we think will give us the sort of information that we need, because we want the results. And I think the sooner, if it means knocking on all these doors, we do that. And I think it's not very easy. Sometimes maybe you go and knock on the door of the government official, the Minister of Finance. At first, I think they will look at you with a lot of suspicion. What do you want all this information for? Who are you? I mean, what do you really know? And then when you consistently, persistently, keep knocking, they get to know a bit more about you. And then, the levels of outlook and the acceptance, set in. And then they say, okay, I think he's trying to simply do, to help us do the job. We are all fighting from the same corner. We want the best to be made from these resources. And then you find the rapport actually maybe getting established, and then we can get bits and pieces. But it's not so easy. At first, you'll be told to go to another, you send from one office to the other, looking for the information. And it's the same picture. It's even maybe tougher for, getting some of that information from the development partners and the donors.
It's tougher.
It's been tougher. But let me be quick to say that I think with the established rapport and our constant pursuance of evidence-based advocacy, in the long run, they've come to realize that I think these guys are actually trying to help us do what we're supposed to be doing here to get the best results. And then, they open up, and then maybe they get us, they invite us to several forums, the joint reviews, and then you get to get a lot of information from these reviews, from the development partners, from the government ministries, from the Ministry of Finance and the others, and from maybe a lot of other private sector and the like. So it's been a process, but it hasn't been as easy. But we realize, I think it still remains a very, I think we still have a lot of room to get a lot of these things done. I think there's still a lot of room. And looking at the average that we are talking about, the 39%, I think we still have a long way to go, because for Malawi, this is still a mixed picture. Looking at the top top donors supporting Malawi, you see a mixed picture, of how transparent they've been. But I think the fact remains: the more transparency we get, the more mutual accountability that we get, I mean, the better results I think will be for all of us, because people will be following up, will be following the money, and I think that will help all of us to get what we want to see at the end of the day from the support that we are giving.
Fantastic, thank you. Ambassador Birx, you also deserve a round of applause, because PEPFAR has really shone the way in a US government system, again, where performance is variable. And you've done really well in your organization. Can you say something about why this is important to you, and what it is that you've done to bring about this real transformation in transparency in your organization?
Thank you. I come out of a very data-rich environment. I came out of the hard bench science of working on HIV vaccines for the last 20 years, and then came to PEPFAR, because PEPFAR was really important at the community level. When you're doing scientific research in communities that are dying from the disease that you're researching, and you don't have the wherewithal to provide them with what they need, it's a very shocking and disconcerting state. So it's really a privilege to be part of PEPFAR and to be able to work with the Global Fund, which I think has changed the dynamic. But in that changing the dynamic, it's created that space of the feeling that we're done and we're not done. And so I think linking the financing with results are absolutely key to have both the American public understand, the Europeans understand, the Australians understand, all of sub-Saharan Africa understand, Asia to understand that we're not done, and that we have a lot of a long road to still go with the number of people that have needs. And to be able to be part of this analysis to really show where our investments are going and linking those to results, I think are just really extraordinarily important.
So what kind of challenges have you had to overcome to make this happen? And I mean, obviously we would like to see other organizations, not just in the US, but across the donor community, really share in that kind of positive improvement. Well, I guess if it was easy, it would have been done everywhere already. So it can't be easy. So
well, it was a little shocking when I came in to be very poor. I have to say, we were a little bit, oh wow, we're very poor, and we didn't have a lot of time to really get everything into place. And we're happy to be fair, but we're at the bottom of fair, so we still have ways to go. And I think there's a deep commitment by this administration to have data transparency. And I think we want to be part of that transparency, and we want to be part of the accountability piece to really, in this day and age where so many people have needs domestically, to really show the translation of the American taxpayer dollars into a hugely impactful program that's not only saving lives but changing the course of the pandemic is really extraordinarily important. So we didn't have as much resistance to the AIDS Transparency Index. I think there's a lot of support at State Department and OMB and other groups. I think the resistance was more about, we're getting very granular. So this is just step one. We are requiring site level data, because I think unless you have the information at the site level where the clients are actually being served, to really understand the quality of the services that are delivered, the cost of delivering those services, and the actual number of peoples reached with those life-saving services, and then the impact of those services, you don't have the whole picture and you can't really invest effectively. And I think in this day and age where all aid dollars are either flat or decreasing, we together as a community have to figure out how to make every dollar or every euro go much further so that we can maximize impact. And so if we don't have our data up there, then DFID can't interpret what we're doing, the French can't, the Belgians can't, JICA can't, GIZ can't. So we really, I think we all have an obligation to have that level of transparency available. But I think it has to be more granular to be really helpful, both at the country level and at civil society level, as well as the government levels.
fantastic. Assistant Secretary General, UNDP's come top. Obviously, you have an enormous commitment to this agenda. Tell us a bit about your vision and why this is so important to you and to UNDP.
Thank you, Owen. We're very happy. We are number one this year. And we have come a long way from the first time this index has been published. UNDP, as you know, is not a typical donor agency. We are the UN's largest development agency, promoting sustainable and inclusive development with our partner countries. All our funding comes from voluntary contributions from our donor countries. So we felt a strong need, to ensure that we have the trust of our donor countries, and we have the trust of the public in our program countries, the beneficiaries we're hoping to support. So I think this trust is at the heart of our transparency effort. And again, transparency is the first step to accountability. So I think since the AIDA Transparency Index provides impetus, a very practical tool for us to materialize this commitment to transparency and accountability, we embraced it. And took a lot of effort, the organization-wide effort of changing mindset, right, to working at every levels, at headquarters, at regional level, at country office level. We promoted this in over 140 offices around the world to have a common standard, right? From changing policies, right, the information disclosure policy, to come up with standards for implementation, and to really linking more than 5,000 projects to this database, this open.undp.org portal that we've established. And also to go from quantity to quality, right? To visual representation of the data so that it is easy and to use and user-friendly database. We put the geographical GPS information, right, to identify the location of the projects and so forth. So it has been a very important exercise for the head of the organization, Helen Clark, and all our staff, I would say, to really, to show that we're committed to this agenda of transparency and accountability.
So there's obviously been very strong political leadership. Was that all that was needed, or was it also a very expensive thing to do, or did it involve? Was it technically very difficult once you had decided you were going to do this? Did it turn out to be just a culture change that needed to bring about, or what was needed really to drive that change through the organization?
I think clearly you first need a very firm commitment. You need a political commitment to this agenda of transparency and accountability. And secondly, you do need to have a strategy, right? Because we're talking about changing mindsets, changing also the organizational culture, right, to be transparent. And you need a dedicated staff and a budget if you want to achieve this goal. Okay? You need and also sustain the effort, because this is not something that you can achieve overnight, even in 1 or 2 years, right? And the fact that we improved our ranking over the last 4 years, speaks to the fact that you need a continued effort to make steady improvement. And I think, with this achievement today, I think we are going to think what to do next, and to not only stay on top, but also improve the quality.
So one of the things that that we're hearing is that next might look like much more detailed information down at the level of the site, of delivery, of what's being delivered to who and to where and by whom, and what results are being achieved there. Is that somewhere that you think UNDP will go, as we've heard from PEPFAR, they are going, or is that too hard and too fast for you to imagine?
I think UNDP has done well in terms of the quantity and the quality of the data it has provided. There's always room for improvement, but overall, I think the over 90% score shows that we have met certain standards. But we recognize that we can do more to focus on project level information, especially to linking results, okay, to the project data that we have published. But we needed to focus more on showing results, what this money has done, okay, to the people we want to support, to the countries we want to support. And also, I think this effort is also a way to promote innovation in the organization. Right? In innovation, we always say work out loud, right? Really try to find new ways of doing business, let people know that you're doing this. And this is working in the open, essentially, right? You let people know what you're doing, right? And subject yourself to a high level of scrutiny, right? And that forces yourself to meet high standards. So I think this is what we will try to aspire to achieve in the next phase. And UNDP has a new strategic plan, relatively new. It's already 1 year, a strategic plan. So that strategic plan emphasizes on a set of results we want to achieve. So we will try to link this open, open data effort to our desire to achieve, better results. So I think this is what we'll focus more.
Excellent. Dalitso, can you say something about, you've heard the ambition of the fellow panelists about where they want to go next. What would be most important for you and the people you work with in your network? For what information would you like to have that you currently don't have access to, and why would that be important for you and your colleagues and other citizens in Malawi?
Well, I think, to begin with, any information I think will be very, will be very, very welcome, because I think this is the information that we need to engage with the people, for all of us to collectively monitor and follow. But I think maybe to begin with, I will emphasize on, there are these commitments that are made, by the different development partners. So I think anything to do with these commitments, fulfilling these commitments, I think will be a very good starting point. For example, we are seeing the timelines, for example, I think that we're talking about by 2015, I think the different players needed to, or committed to doing something. Maybe we can begin with that. What sort of information do we need to make available so that it helps us, get to where we need to be by the said deadlines of some of these commitments? I think that would be a very good starting point. But the aspect I think that is being highlighted of not just the quantity, the quality and the timely, access of some of this data will help. And I think this is the most important thing. We are all fighting from the same corner. It's not like we are fighting against each other. We all want to support each other so that we see the sort of development results that I think all of us will be happy with when we are seeing the quality of the services being delivered being excellent. I think all of us will be happier than maybe we are. So the quality, the timeliness of this data, I think will be very important. But to begin with, I think we really would want to get as much data, leave the analysis and the repackaging for a lot of other people to be able to understand it. Leave it to us, because this is what we are trying to make sure that we continue to up our game and get better and better in doing that. But this is a true spirit of partnership, I think, that we need to continue engaging in as a collective responsibility towards seeing the sort of results that we want to see at the end of the day.
So, Rachel, if there was good quality data, then Dalitso and his colleagues could interpret it, use it, and make use of it. What does the 2014 index tell us about the quality of the data that's being published? I mean, to what extent are the improvements that we're seeing scope and coverage, and to what extent are we now seeing this, what you referred to in your talk as comprehensive, comparable, timely data that Dalitso says he needs? Where are we on that?
Basically, you won't do well in the index unless you're publishing comprehensive data. So we see data quality as being those four things. It's timeliness, so being published every quarter at minimum, preferably monthly, which some organisations like the UNDP are doing. And it needs to be comprehensive. It shouldn't matter which country you're in or which sector you're interested in. You should be able to get the data. It shouldn't matter who the end user is. And at the moment, we're seeing some progress, in some countries or some areas. And I did mention that some publishers are making progress, but they need to roll that out across all the countries they're working in, all the sectors they're working in, because you can't predict who your end user will be. Comprehensiveness is also a problem, I think, because of poor systems. So some donors have said to us that the information is locked away in different systems in different country offices. So there has to be some information management systems upgrades that need to be made so you can pull all that data together at headquarters level or wherever it is to pull it all together in one place. So donors are quite frank with us in our conversations with them around the index about some of the challenges they face internally with this. We recognise that. But I think as we've heard from the UNDP, you can start somewhere, start with one country or one sector. As PEPFAR, they've made steps, and then they plan to continue to improve and roll that out across all the different countries or sectors they're working in. And then the accessibility is the final thing. There's a big difference between publishing loads of PDFs on websites. I have a team of 3 that work closely on collecting the data for the index, and they literally sit and look on websites with PDFs in different languages. They have to scrape the data, translate it, put it all in one place. It's not comparable. These are people with a good internet connection, a good understanding of aid, good understanding of the agencies, and it takes them weeks to collect this data for just 68 organisations. It shouldn't have to be like that. You know, scraping stuff off PDFs or going to 4 embassy websites and the main website and then a multilateral website to get information on one project, which is what we've had to do in some cases. It's a huge time suck. And how anyone who doesn't know about these donors and how they operate would manage to do that, you know, it's hard work. So this idea of having a one-stop shop where you could get this information, you know, that's the first step, but you know, there's a difference between raw XML data and then meaningful data for people in Malawi or people in the UK or people who work in health and care about HIV/AIDS, you know, for them to do something meaningful with that information and be able to map it across other information items and follow the money and map it against other flows as well. This isn't all about aid, right? If you're looking at Malawi spending, I suspect Dalitso is also very interested in, you know, 40% is aid flows, 60% is government money. How do you map that together and follow that through? So it's about interoperability as well, being able to map it against the budget and follow it through.
Let me ask you about this interoperability question, because PEPFAR spends a lot of its money through other organisations, including through other US organisations, some of which haven't achieved what you've achieved yet in being transparent. If you give money, say, to USAID to spend on HIV/AIDS, will they have the same will you require them to have the same commitment to transparency as you have? If you spend money through a private contractor or through an NGO, will you make sure that that money is transparent, or does the trail go cold as soon as you hand the check to the first implementing organisation?
Well, that wouldn't be very helpful, would it?
That was kind of my point.
So Secretary Kerry, about 6 weeks ago, actually it was June, so longer than that. We've lost track of time. We've been so busy. But Secretary Kerry announced this new interagency collaborative, which is bringing together all the agencies to work on this data collectively. And if I could appeal to anybody in the audience who works with large data sets, we could use help. Free help, but we could definitely use help. And it's going to be fun, because there's going to be a lot of data from all kinds of different countries, and we could really use help, because it doesn't help us to have all that level of detail if it isn't digestible and presentable and actionable. And we're still worried about that. I mean, we have a lot of people coming together. Over 50 people will come into this interagency collaborative from all the agencies, including MCC, because we're trying to learn from them. They've done brilliant work, and we're trying to bring them in and understand that. People from NIH. But really, you can see that this would become unwieldy when you have 100,000 sites. So we're really trying to figure out how we can really work with these large data sets to really help others analyze it and to help with the innovation. We've already found in the last 3 months amazing information when you take site-level data rather than partner-level data. Because a partner may have 100 sites. Well, some of those sites may see 500 patients, and some of those sites may see 2. And really, when the mean then comes out to be 100, how do you really know if the sites are resourced appropriately? How do you know if they have the right human capacity, if everything's done as a mean rather than the individual site level? So going to the site level is a great thing. It's going to be very innovative. It's going to allow others to look at this information. I think it's a struggle when everybody's afraid that they're going to look bad. But you know, it's the same way in the science world. You can never get people to publish negative results. But the negative results would be great for all of us. We wouldn't waste time repeating that experiment and thinking we were brilliant and finding out that, oh no, someone else did that 10 years ago but never reported it because it was too depressing. I mean, we have to be able to accept that we're not perfect every time. And from that lack of perfection, we learn not only how to do things better, but other people will see that lack of perfection, understand what was done, and not make the same mistakes. So I think that, but we really do need help with this open source data to be because in the long run, to be totally sustainable, which we're committed to, it has to translate to the country to be able to use across diseases, not just HIV, which will increase even further the volume of the data set. So those of you that have, there's a lot of money in the IT world. So come see us. It's really fun. Your 20-somethings will love it. It will be a great public-private partnership, but it would be great for all of us to be able to utilize the data.
There's a great offer to come and do some free work for PEPFAR.
Yes. I met some people here. I think they could do that.
No, I think people would.
Yeah.
You were kidding, but I think they're.
No, I'm not kidding.
I just want to press you on the question I was asking there. That sounds all very collaborative and carrot-like, but I was asking you a bit about the stick part of this. If an organization chooses not or is unable for some reason to publish information in the IATI format, do they not get money from PEPFAR, or do you give them money anyway?
So, we have very good agencies that we work with. So all of them, in order to receive the 2014 money, had to sign at the highest level of leadership of that agency that they would produce the data down to the site level. So in order to receive the money, they had to sign for that in 2014. So, and that money's moving now. We are almost 9 months behind in our fiscal years, so all of our 2014 money is going out. It's already at the agencies.
And that will be in this internationally comparable format of IATI, or that would be in a special PEPFAR, put a PDF on a website format?
Well, we didn't put a PDF on the website. Okay. Go to our data things, you'll see there's no PDF in there. But it's, first, we're creating these open source databases to be able to be integrated, because we want to take the expenditure data and link it to the results and the quality. So those have to be triangulated. And we're working through this because the volume of data is quite enormous. And we're trying to figure out how to do that effectively through this 50-member group that is working on it. We've already, within the 2014 reporting, we have a semi-annual reporting and an annual reporting. Already through the semi-annual reporting in a series of countries, they've analyzed their yields, their HIV positivity down to the site level. This is enormously helpful because if you triangulate counseling and testing of adults with PMT-CT data, you can finally now map the epidemic down to the village level using programmatic data. Again, in order to make that effective, we really need geospatial people to come and help with those thousands of data points, but imagine being able to map the epidemic down to the village level. Now, I know that would be fun for some people in the audience to really be able to contribute in that way, but this would be so now it's mapped at the provincial level or the district level or the county level, but imagine knowing the positivity rates at the village level and to be able to show exactly where HIV is and where HIV isn't, and being able to target your resources so that where you have a lot of HIV, they have more resources, they have more human capacity, they have more capacity to reach out into the community. All the community wraparound programs are there. And imagine being able to tell the health workers that don't have HIV and they're in a health center doing test after test after test for HIV that's negative, 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 that maybe they should be testing for malaria or diarrhea or respiratory diseases. And you've offloaded work to a nurse that's overworked by trying to do all of these tests, by saying, well, you don't have HIV here. And then you use other surveillance techniques to figure that out. So I think the agencies are very excited to be part of this grand plan.
Excellent.
Yeah, just you were talking about the quality of data, and we're talking about the funding, the sticks, that this transparency can have, I think for UNDP, which really its funding is based on voluntary contribution, we recognize really the importance of being transparent, to gain trust. So it does help with the trust of donors, right, for funding. But I think the self-interest doesn't stop there, because we've learned that the aid transparency effort helps us to improve effectiveness of how we are managing information, how we manage communication of results. So there's a lot of self-interest, that we look at, when we undertake this exercise. And also, when it comes to innovation, for example, in the IT world, we're talking a lot about big data, right? Data revolution. But this is our own data revolution, right? We, by undertaking this effort, we're creating a wealth of a database through which we can really mine information to guide our policy analysis, to look at performance across the board, because sometimes we needed to ensure consistency of a performance across the board. So there's a lot of usefulness, not only just as a commitment, but also practical benefits.
That's a fantastic point on which I'm now going to open up to the audience here in Washington, D.C. Are there some microphones? What we're going to do, if the panel's happy to do this, is take some questions. If you have a question or a comment, please keep it short. If I start waving at you, we'll take the microphone away. There's one here. Do we have a microphone? Fantastic, thank you. Oh, okay.
I'm Whitney Debevoise from Arnold and Porter. Where does OECD DAC fit in this equation? This is wonderful. We've got NGO driving all of this, responsible for data.
My name is Safile, a student of Divine University from Sierra Leone. My question is for the UNDP and the man from Malawi. We know that AIDS practically, naturally, is meant and provided for food security, health, education, road construction, infrastructural development, governance, human rights, and security. Africa, the continent, I want to know whether UNDP is monitoring all aids going to Africa. Because Africa is not going forward. Each time tens of billions of dollars provided, few steps ahead, 100 steps backward. This is my question.
Thank you very much. I'm enjoying these nice short questions, so please keep them coming. There's one over here.
Hi, I'm Jack McAllister from AMFAR, the Foundation for AIDS Research. My question is for Ambassador Birx. First, I want to thank you for coming here today and to congratulate you and OGAC on PEPFAR's improvement in the ranking. It's really a testament to your prioritization of the issue. My question, it's great to know that this effort is underway to better coordinate data across US agencies, but for the AIDS response, I would like to hear more about how PEPFAR is working with the Global Fund to improve data and where the Global Fund will sit in your efforts to get better site level and more granular data.
Fantastic. So let's take them in order. I think the first question was for you, Rachel, wasn't it? Where's the DAC?
The OECD's Development Assistance Committee owns the creditor reporting system, which is a very good statistical database of historical data on development flows for DAC members. And we use it all the time because it's the one place where we can get some comparable data at the moment on all those different members. There's a difference between what we're asking for and statistical data. We're asking for current accessible data. You can't actually download CRS data as a whole without paying for it. And when you do have it, at maximum, I think it's 18 months out of date, a minimum 18 months out of date, and maximum can be over 2 years. What we really want to see is data for more than just DAC donors, but all different kind of providers involved in aid implementation, and to be able to get that every quarter at minimum, and preferably monthly, so you can get it whenever you need, and it's more than historical statistical data, it's project documents, it's results documents, it's evaluation reports. So the DAC does play a very important role in keeping that statistical database, and we really value it, but that's not to say that common, accessible, comparable data that's more current isn't needed.
And then the question about so all this aid has been given to Africa. What's happened to it? Are you really monitoring it? And then asked Dalitso too.
I think my African Director Bureau counterpart is not here, so I will just provide a general answer. I think I can safely say that no country has developed simply because of development assistance. Okay. countries develop because of their commitment to long-term sustainable and inclusive development. And what we're doing through this aid transparency initiative is to do our part for the aid effectiveness agenda. That, to say that we are committed to ensure our accountability to the public, to the taxpayers. So I think it is really a concerted efforts of all partners that will help the development of countries in which we're working. That's, I think, what I can say.
So do you want to answer that? Well, thank you very much. I think that's a very important question, and it's at the center of the quest for development effectiveness. And I'm sure this is why I think we are talking about the Aid Transparency Index alongside all the other efforts that are there, both at the global level, at the continental, but most importantly at the national level, because this monitoring begins from there, because that's where the rubber is hitting the ground. That's where the actual service delivery is taking place. So it's really very important that we really must be asking that question. There's a lot of this aid going to all those aspects that we highlighted: infrastructure development, food security, HIV and AIDS, because we want to provide relief, we want to help. What is really happening? Are these resources going towards the intended? So I think this is where we really must continue to do a lot more. But I think for transparency, for accountability to be possible, I think we need to get a lot of this transparency going, because those questions now will make sense, and then we'll be able to get the right answers if the resources are going where they're supposed to go, or if the corruption is what is thriving because it's taking away all this aid, towards the pockets of the greedy few, which is really happening, I think, in a lot of countries across the world. So I think this is where we continue to be vigilant, and we must continue to be vigilant as different players. This is where I think I kept on emphasizing that it's a collective responsibility. If all of us join hands and we do our part, so beginning with the donors, beginning with the development partners, they are providing, for example, like in Malawi, it's 40% of the national budget is through the aid or the grants or the loans. They also must do their part so that they make available all this information to the key stakeholders, so that we can hold the governments accountable at different levels. We also make sure that the donors are also doing their part in being accountable, the commitments that they are making, so that we see that. And then all of this, when we do that, then for us, institutions like ours, with the civil society, we're teaming up with the media, we're teaming up with the community-based organizations, engaging at different levels, we'll be able now to follow the money. We know how so much came, as part of this 40% of the national budget, so much was meant for this, and is coming from donor X. So much is meant for food security and is coming from donor Y. So much is meant for HIV and AIDS and is coming from PEPFAR. And then we can now task each other to follow and see where it's really going. We hear all these alarming figures, like 30% of resources going down the drain to corruption. We should be able, if we are asking this question, we should be able now to segment and see what is it that we can do better and differently, so that 30% doesn't go down the drain, but we make sure that it's really going where it's supposed to go to make a difference. So that's why I think we are so thankful for this initiative, and I think that's why I talked about not losing sight of the bigger picture, not losing sight, not having our eyes off the ball, and it's a collective responsibility. So the more transparent we are, the more we'll see the accountability really working, and the more we'll see the results that all of us want to see, as UNDP highlighted, with whatever innovations that we can bring on board, but we must see this development effectiveness.
Thank you, Dalitso. Thank you. Ambassador, your work with the Global Fund, what are you doing? How are you working with them on
Yes,
this?
thank you. And thank you to AMFAR for your long commitment to providing transparency and research and getting clinical trials, and how extraordinary that was in the long decades of your commitment. So we've shared all of our tools with the Global Fund, but I always think that you until you get your own house in order and really do the cultural change and start utilizing data effectively, you can't start saying, well, are you doing the same thing, or how are we going to share that? So right now we're in that space of trying to really get our house in order and utilize data effectively to really make programmatic decisions for PEPFAR. But we've talked to the chair, the director of the Global Fund, go way back. Both were in Tony Fauci's lab. So we've talked about how we will, obviously we're sharing everything that we're doing. And the intent is obviously at the country level to be able to take this to the country level, so ministries of health and ministries of finance see how all of the investments are commingling at the site level to achieve the goals that we all want of ending the pandemic. So I think we're in a stepwise mode right now, but they certainly have all of our quality tools that we've been launching, our expenditure analyses tools, as well as our results tools.
Fantastic. I know that we're going to, I'm hoping that we're going to have the Minister of Finance arrive in about 10 minutes, so we're going to try and take 2 more rounds of questions before that. Before we do, can I just say how nice it was to hear a donor say, before we tell other people what to do, we should get our own house in order. I failed in the last round of questions to invite any women to ask a question. That was my failure of pointing. So I am now pointing at women.
Hi, my name is Laia Greeno. I'm with Interaction. Sorry, I'll move here so everyone can actually see me. So I think the index shows that we still have a long way to go on both the supply and the quality of data, but I think it's also important that we start talking about what's needed to get this data used. And apart from internal use, the aid publishers using their own data. So I'm wondering what, especially the agencies that maybe are starting to have made good progress on quality, what you're starting to do to engage external audiences in the use of your data, whether you've done anything or what your plans might be. And then perhaps for Callisto, how you would like to see donors engage in that dialogue with external audiences. Thank you.
Fantastic. Casey.
Thanks very much. You mentioned the data revolution and the 2015 deadline, and I wondered if you could speak a little bit on if and how you might be engaging with the post-2015 development agenda.
Hi, Kelly Seeger with DAI. Rachel, you mentioned foreignassistance.gov, and all of you mentioned, improving quality of data. And recently, foreignassistance.gov has been revamped, and we really appreciate that. But I was wondering if anyone is here representing them, as we're having some issues with accessibility of all of their data.
So maybe Rachel can say something about that. Okay, let's go back to the panel. I'll ask for brief responses. Don't feel you have to answer all the questions, but
okay.
Something you want to say about.
Yeah, very good questions. On using your own data, I can tell you my experience as a regional director. I think for me, this open data website provides an outsider's view of UNDP. Okay, when I look at our own performance, so it's challenging for me to see this publicly. Anybody in the world can see in their eyes how UNDP is performing in Asia and the Pacific. So I look at it from this lens. So I'm trying to use this to inform my colleagues across the country office to see this is how people see you. Are you happy with what people see you? Okay. So I think that this is the one use that I'm practicing. And I think we're really at the beginning of using the data to interact with the public. And we need to look at how we can really mine this data and fairly aggressively to use this data effectively. I think this links to the post-2015 question, because the post-2015 agenda emphasizes strongly the interactions between different partners, between the governments and the public, between donors and private sector and so forth. So I think the availability of these transparent and comprehensive data sets will allow us to really look at practical ways how to enhance this interaction between different partners. So I think it's very important to do. Yeah.
Fabulous. Rachel.
I think in response to the question about the data revolution and post-2015, At Publish What You Fund, we've recently launched a campaign called the Road to 2015 with a coalition of civil society organisations to look exactly at that question: how best can we engage in these discussions, and what information is needed around that data revolution. We're also going to start looking at the interoperability of data. So how do you fit aid flows with tax, with extractives, with remittances and other flows coming in and out of countries, so you can get that bigger picture of data as part of monitoring any new commitments that are made as part of post-2015. And we also want to do some research on results, how best to publish results information and how that could be used to meaningfully track progress. I think everyone in this room knows that some of the MDGs, it's pretty hard to actually track progress on them because there aren't data sets there to check, and we want to make sure that any new goals that are set, you can meaningfully monitor progress against them. And that aid is part of that, but it fits with other flows as well.
You don't want to say anything about the foreign assistance dashboard? Or
did you say you're from DAI? Yeah. DAI Europe is publishing to IATI. It's a private sector provider that's publishing. It's one of the 284, which is great news. So we can get data on your Europe activities. I'm sorry you're having problems with the dashboard. I think there are people here and they can probably help you use it, and they'd be very keen to get that feedback.
Sure, I'll just answer.
Do you want to quickly?
So we're here and we have a table back there.
Yeah, and they were very helpful with the PEPFAR data. They were the first group to come and help us, because we had a lot of teams that had to put this together within 3 weeks. Just a quick comment. Many of you go to the World Bank site, and I'm sure you're pulling down pieces, and I always go there because I always like to do all the economic and age analysis. But sometimes you would like to do economic, age, and health analysis simultaneously. And I think this is the thing that we're talking about of why we need more interventions. We need to be able to do multi-dimensional analyses, and that's including with our database, but all of these databases, which are really quite bi-dimensional at this point. And I think that's why we need some innovative thinkers to really help us with that utility, to really make these databases live for everyone, to really be able to do the kind of triangulations that everybody wants to be able to do. We have a whole cohort of 18 to 25-year-olds who are obviously quite facile with all of these things and love things that move and move quickly, but we don't have the databases that particularly appeal to them or analytic tools that appeal. Yet that's where a lot of our innovation could come from. So we have to really figure out how to make our databases appealing and the analysis discernible and actionable. And I can't underestimate that enough. It's great we have all this data available, but we have to make it real for everyone that needs to be able to use it.
I think that's a very important aspect. The more user-friendly the data will be, the various data sets, I think they'll be very appealing to all of us, especially the civil society and other players, to be able to make sense of that and then connect it and apply to the real-time monitoring that is going on all the time. And I just to touch on the very important aspect of dialogue. I think dialogue mechanism that I think our lady raised there, I think it's important. Dialogue over and above the access to all this data, I think would be very important, just like we're having dialogue now, with different players. It's very important. I think it will help to really bring that human face to the data. It will help to bring that, put things into the proper perspective, I think, from different aspects. And I think even at the connecting the dots from the global mechanisms, dialogue mechanisms, I know the Busan, all these declarations that are made at the global level, and then commitments made, by development partners. Accra, Paris, Accra, Busan, Mexico. What sense do these things, make when we are now linking to the continental, linking to the national? And I think this is one important mechanism that we are even looking at in Malawi, for example, because you look at all these top, development partners making a contribution to the budget for Malawi, for example. We've tried to structure some dialogue mechanisms so that, and they're proven to be very useful for, even us as civil society, because we've asked to be a part of that, to provide that fresh perspective, independent, even some sort of a triangulation, if you like, because in these meetings, the development partners are able to ask some questions. Well, at the beginning, they set benchmarks, for the different, contributions that are being made, targets, indicators, for the milestone that they are setting. And then when they are meeting twice a year, for example, in March and in September, they are following up on the different benchmarks, So it's already a way towards the development effectiveness. So I think it's important to have the dialogue mechanisms going at different levels.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask you all to thank our panel. We have our keynote speaker has arrived. Great panel, and thank you all. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Great. I'll introduce her then. Thanks, everybody. It is an enormous honour for me to introduce the Honourable Minister Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Minister of Finance for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I'm sure everyone, please come on up. I'm sure every one of you here knows that the Honourable Minister has not only been Foreign Minister and Finance Minister in Nigeria, but she's the first woman to hold either of those posts. And everybody here in Washington, D.C., of course, knows her as a former Managing Director of the World Bank. Honourable Minister, you are an inspiration to all of us. You're a friend of the Centre for Global Development. It's an honour for me to welcome you back here, and we look forward to hearing your keynote address.
Owen,
And a board member.
full disclosure.
And a full disclosure. Full disclosure and a board member. Thank you, Nancy. Honourable Minister, you're very welcome.
Well, thank you very much. It's good we started on a transparent note because I'm very fond of CGD and glad to be associated, and I'm really happy to see you, Jean-Louis, some old friends in the crowd. First, I'm sorry to be late, and I feel a little bit at a disadvantage because I missed the discussion. But I am very happy to be here this morning at the launch of this 2014 Transparency Index report, because I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was in 2008, right? When they started the International Aid Transparency Initiative. And I was at the World Bank then and, saw the beginnings of it. So I'm quite pleased to see how far this has gone. And in this past decade, we've seen transparency and accountability of aid move quite far up the international development agenda. I think before everybody sort of assumed that, it was okay. Once you give aid, everything is wonderful. And people didn't really think about the transparency of it all and who needed to know and have the information. But now, with the Busan Partnership, the Global Partnership for Effective Development, the work of all of you in demanding more transparency and accountability, I think we are where we are today, and it's very good because we need it. It's a significant and integral approach, in my view, to addressing the core challenges that limit aid effectiveness. As you know, including the coordination of aid projects, some of the things I'll talk about just now, predictability of volumes of aid, and greater ownership of that aid by the partner countries. And of course, the Busan Partnership, and permit me, because I was co-chair, so one of the things we tried to underscore there was really the importance of establishing transparent public financial management and aid information systems. So this aid transparency is not, for someone like me on the other side, it's not just about aid. It goes further into how that interrelates with all finances of the whole country. And if you don't get this right, it means you don't also get more transparency into the finances of the country that you're dealing with. So it's really beyond that, as I'm sure you've all agreed. And I think that in the run-up to post-2015, where we really need to we'll need to focus not just on aid, but on domestic resource mobilization and the use and efficiency of resources in general, that this theme and this index that has been developed will be even more important than ever. And of course, the thing that when we talk about the Aid Transparency Index, we need to keep in mind who benefits. Unless we think about that all the time, we won't be able to push and move forward. And of course, the governments, first and foremost, I think are the primary beneficiaries of this. And I know we've moved a long way. Honestly, when I look at it from my 2 decades plus in the World Bank to where we are today, I think we've made a lot of progress. And the fact that we can have this kind of index and be able to compare and see who is doing well and not helps a lot. So what I'm about to say should be taken in that context. Though I think we still need to move further, because I can tell you from where I sit that governments that receive aid are still experiencing some of these problems of not knowing exactly who is coming in, how many projects, how much. And it comes from, and I must in this not just paint a large brush, but say that, unfortunately, I don't know how many bilaterals are in the room, that there are 3 groups. There are the multilaterals, whom I think have moved a long way, and I think they score well on this 2014 index. There are certain bilaterals, bigger ones like the DFID, the Canadians, and so on, who have made quite a bit of. And then there are others, where we still need improvement. And some of them, the reason why recipient governments don't feel or still feel a gap is because they use third party to deliver their aid. And this is good. There's nothing wrong with using the UN system or NGOs. No. It's a question that then it multiplies the number of actors. And very often the governments don't have the capacity or don't know. So you have this. And as the aid landscape changes and becomes more complex, as we get emerging markets coming in as aid donors, as foundations, international, and in my country, for instance, we now have homegrown foundations, local ones that are also entering this space. So you can imagine the multiplicity of actors in this aid space. So as they get more and more, and then we find that the landscape is still complex and that governments still do not know. So having this index, and I hope you push it further to incorporate more and more of the actors that may not be there now, so that governments can benefit from it, because they really need to know and to get a handle. I mean, a recent case we had of a bilateral donor who wanted to help us on something, and went through the UN, which is fine. Nigeria is a very low recipient of donor funding, so we're not a good example. But even for our small receipts, less than 5% of our budget, and, not a big deal. But every bit counts. When I say not a big deal, it's not that we don't appreciate it because it's a catalyst, just that we may not be the best example. But even at that, going through a third party, signed an agreement with the third party without the government being a signatory. So we heard that they had given resources to a UN body to help us execute something, but we were not made a party to the agreement. So then how were we supposed to know whether that thing they were helping us on was going to deliver according to government's plans? They didn't even invite us. So it was later on, being a good donor, we called them and said, well, thank you so much, but there's a little something missing here. And that's that the government is not present in this agreement. Could we just have an MOU done that includes us, so that we can make sure that what they're doing responds to our priorities? So we still have those kinds of challenges and problems. The second point is for those for whom aid is a large part of the budget, from 40 to 60%, and there are still certain countries, especially the fragile ones. I still hear the finance ministers, saying they are not, the predictability, the transparency about when the resources will come is still an issue. And quite frankly, this then has a big impact on macroeconomic management. Because if it's not really clear when these resources will come in and how they will impact you, and you've already programmed them into your budget, then it becomes an issue. Donor agencies themselves need this transparency. Why? Because very often, especially on bilaterals, when they come into a country, they're not really aware of what else is being done in the area they are interested in. And people have now narrowed. We focus on these countries with this subject and that subject, but there may be other actors. And then you're delivering. And unless we can have a measure of transparency on who is doing what with how much, coordinated by the government, again, then the agencies won't know what's happening, and that creates another problem. I mean, again, when we had the issue of our Chibok girls, that was so painful for us and still is painful. We had many donors coming in and saying they would want to help. And then we asked them, well, how would you want us to help? They said they were ready to offer psychological counseling to the parents and the remaining girls and so, but there were several of them offering that. And we said, okay, at some point, we can't have different groups offering. And by the way, maybe psychological counseling may not be the best, because, you have that expertise, but the culture and the way of viewing the issue may be different. Maybe you can help us, instead of giving us counselors, perhaps can we recruit some Nigerians, who are counselors, who could actually, from that side, or others who can help us. But really, this was difficult for them to do. What they wanted to do was give us bodies. So we again have these kinds of issues to deal with. And then lastly, in the countries of the donors, we have the civil society that needs to know. Because the only way they can hold government accountable, and I mean constructive civil society, because again, we hear, there are those who don't want to be constructive and move along, and those who do. But I'm talking of responsible, constructive civil society. When they have this information, then again, they can help hold the donors and their government to account in the way that these resources are used. So I think that all I'm trying to say is that this, for me, is a great thing, is a big advance. I think we need to push it. We need to even make it work further. We are moving, but we haven't yet attained nirvana in this, and we still have a long way to go. And so no complacency, we have to keep pushing this agenda. And I think that's why you're all here. I just want to thank you very much for listening.
Would you be willing to answer some questions? Yeah?
I can take a couple of questions.
Are you okay? I don't want to ambush you.
No.
Okay, fantastic. Do we still have microphones? There's a question at the back there, please. The microphones are coming back in the room. Sorry, I've ambushed our colleagues. There we go.
Thank you, Minister, for joining us. I'm Xiao from Montreal Institute of International Studies, currently working on mapping out China's foreign assistance in Sri Lanka and Myanmar, if not Nigeria. So my question is how to categorize the emergent donors' activities. Because since there's an increasing trend for Chinese firms, at least, that increasingly using foreign aid funds as a way to get subsidized loans and export credits to expand their foreign market because of the credit shrink domestically caused by China's banking reforms. So my question is that do you think this kind of the nature of commercial activity make China's project fall into the category of aid? Or is there any need for just create some separate index for emerging donors like China? That's it. Thank you.
I suggest we take another question. You've already asked a question. If there's somebody else who hasn't asked a question, there's one over here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Ed Almondar, formerly from the World Bank. Minister, I particularly appreciated your emphasis on the integration of the external assistance into the domestic resource mobilization and expenditure patterns. This leads me also to wonder about the autonomy of a goal of publishing what you fund and aid agencies publishing what they fund independent of the publication of data by the recipient governments. I even would speculate that this might lead to some disempowerment of the recipients by doing this autonomously, and would wonder whether this could be integrated, perhaps by ATI and others, into some broader expenditure publication series. Thank you.
Okay.
you want to-
Okay. Two very good questions. Thank you. On the issue of the Chinese categorization, very interesting work. That is, I'd love to see. I tend to look at it this way. In Nigeria, we have quite a bit of dialogue, discourse, and lending from the Chinese, and a few grants for a few specific things. But what we really want to see is direct investment, private investment into the economy. There tends to be a tendency with us is lending, but that's okay. So I separate it. Once it's lending, even though you're borrowing, it's still a form of aid assistance, and I think should be mapped into aid. When it is the direct investment by a Chinese company, then it falls into the category of foreign direct investment into the country. So I don't think, even if it's commercial in nature, but we are borrowing. It's we borrow from the World Bank, for instance, and now that my country is a lower middle income country and has moved, we'll be paying slightly higher rates of interest. We're still going to look at it in the aid category. So I think you should view the Chinese activities, because they are lending at concessional rates, for instance, categorize them as aid, even if it's to fund infrastructure, and that's fine. So, and it will be interesting to see how they map. I hope that the index will be catching some of the different types of activities that they've got. But there's no inherent, I want to say, just because it's Chinese, some people automatically like to think it's less transparent, and it's not. There's something opaque. If you, the country, are in control of what you want and how you get the aid, there's nothing that is opaque about it, because you can put it all out there. So you should also work with the countries, to get their side and what they're trying to do with that. So for me, it's still aid, to answer your question. Then the second issue on the autonomy of the goal, you make a very good point, but I see this in phases. I think, we need to start somewhere. And, first with donors publishing what they fund, that's fine, because that never really used to happen. So in the manner we're seeing it now. I'm moving on, but you're quite right that along the line, it's all about the impact on the budget. And so you really at some stage need to look at the two, and the government can do the two. From their own side, publish what is in the budget, which will include what aid they are getting. And the donor can also push from their side to put it in the broader context, but it will take us time to get there. I don't think it's something that can happen in all countries at once, but it's a goal we should certainly aim for. I mean, we publish our budget to the last detail. In my country, I think we are the only one where you can tell how much the president is spending to feed his family in the State House. So it's all out there to the minutest detail. But we are not so good we haven't comprehensively put all the aid we receive out there. I haven't published that, to be honest with you. So maybe that's what we need to do to complement the two. Maybe because we keep thinking, okay, this is not a sizable, a big part, but I think we should do it. The two should go together. Okay, thank you very much.
Please, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a really interesting morning. I'm not going to try to sum it up, but I do want to make two observations as somebody who's followed this issue really from the beginning in Accra as we began to talk about the importance of transparency. One is, my gosh, we've come a long way, haven't we, from something that a small number of people thought was important to now something that people are talking about. We've made real progress. Organizations are really pushing to get further up the index, and we're beginning to see data come online. And the other observation is, don't we have a long way to go still? We've heard from a finance minister, we've heard from a civil society representative that they still don't get told, what donor countries are doing in their country, that information is not available to them still, that civil society are going to have to knock on doors of ministers and officials and of donor agencies to try to collect this data. And we've heard some very exciting new trends towards, for example, following the money down to the level of the site. The extent to which those organizations that are publishing information are using that information themselves, and thereby not only being able to make better decisions and do better research, but also thereby improve the data and make sure that it's right and use it. It's called the dog fooding principle. It's a fabulous principle, and we haven't talked about it today, but governments like the UK and the Netherlands are doing that. And it's really improved the quality, the comprehensiveness, the timeliness of their data because they're using it themselves on their websites and in their work. So we're seeing the trend towards following the money. We're seeing the trend towards the dog fooding principle of using the data. But we also have this long tail of organizations that aren't there yet. We're not on track. That was the key message from Rachel's presentation. We're not on track to meet the Busan commitment for all data, all aid to be publicly available. And that's despite the efforts of organizations we've heard from today, like PEPFAR, like the UNDP, who've made great progress. There are still a lot of organizations, some in the US and many outside the US, that still aren't doing it. We can do it. There are these great examples, these great beacons. And I think, as Dalitso said, this is a collective problem that we can solve together. And what I see in this room is people who are solving this together. And so it's in that spirit that I hope that you'll all come and have coffee with us. There are some great demonstrations at the back of the room here of information systems that are now being now available. Lots of different organizations. You can go and talk to the people who are operating them. So I hope you'll stay for a coffee, talk to those people, and maybe take up the invitation to help the organizations here figure out how to collect and use this information so that we can together make faster progress towards solving global poverty. Thanks very much all for coming.